In this episode, we speak to our brother Hashmat, who is a Hazara-Australian person. He describes his story of moving to Pakistan and then Australia through escaping Afghanistan after the Civil War. We dive deep into his story and his family story, as well as the rich history of Hazara in Afghanistan. We also talk about the Australian identity and what it really means to be Australian, and how can we progress and unite as a culture.
I'm in the middle of it because that's been going on for a while now. But prior to the big one that I was just telling you about.
Yeah. So look, I'm curious because you speak so many languages. You speak Farsi, you speak Hazaragi.
Yes. So there's probably a disclaimer to be made there. So Farsi is kind of the umbrella language, and it has different dialects. Mm-hmm. There's 3 different dialects that kind of like the main dialects that I speak: Hazaragi, Dari, and Farsi, right? Mm-hmm. So all those 3 are basically the dialects of the same language, which is Farsi. Mm-hmm. But the thing is that over the course of history, those dialects have dramatically changed because they've borrowed words from other languages, and geographically being distant as well. So, the speakers of those 3 dialects, I guess. So they've kind of evolved into these 3 new languages, I guess. So those are the 3. And then on top of that, I speak Urdu, which is what they speak in Pakistan. Yeah. And that's because I lived there. Has it started, by the way? Or just, oh, nice. Cool. So there's Urdu in Pakistan. I lived there for a few years, so I learned that. And then Hindi off the back of that because it's so similar. Then I started watching a lot of, Bollywood movies and speaking to a lot of, late night conversations in those taxis, So practice my Hindi. And I've got a lot of Indian friends as well. So kind of like kept up the language and then English, obviously. So kind of, you could say 3 languages, but you could also say 5, depending on how you look at it. Depending whether you consider my Hindi good enough to say, okay, you speak both Urdu and Hindi. Or you could just say, okay, just the Urdu and, you're trying to speak Hindi.
So how would you say brother in all those languages? I know in Hindi and Urdu, it's bhai.
Bhai is in Urdu and Hindi. In Farsi, it's brother.
Brother.
This is what I mean when I say those 3 dialects of the same language, the differences, right? So I'll just say it to you. In Hazaragi, it's biror, which comes from the word brother. It's just a shorter version of it, bror, right? In Dari, it's barodar, which is the formal way of pronouncing the word, barodar. In Farsi or the Iranian dialect, there's a few words for it. You could say dodosh, which is like bro in a way. But if you say brother, they would still understand, because that's a formal way of saying it.
It's so incredible. And look, there's a magic in there because you're fascinated by languages as well, and I can see it. And you and I were colleagues in the youth-led unit or known as Culture Spring now, right? But I think since the start, we've always admired the way that each other speak. We just share so much love. We're like, oh, bro, I love the way you speak and all that. But I'm very curious about your family history because you say you're from the Hazara community from Afghanistan.
Yeah.
But you've lived in Pakistan and you've done a lot of travel, haven't you? So take us back to the start. How did Hashmat come to be and your family's history in Afghanistan and prior to that?
Yeah, cool. Probably be a bit of a long answer. So yeah, like you said, I belong to an ethnic group called the Hazaras or Hazaras. We mainly reside in Afghanistan. So the majority of the Hazara people, those who identify as Hazaras, are in Afghanistan. A few millions. And then, there is also Hazaras in Pakistan. There's a big community of Hazaras now in Australia. So Hazara-Australians, Europe and all that. So there's a big population in Iran as well. Hazaras, I guess the history of it all, if you look back, is there's different theories about how we ended up in Afghanistan. But yeah, so we can probably dig into that a little bit further. But just to sort of sum it up, yeah. So the Hazaras in Afghanistan are the third largest ethnic minority. They're just sort of ethnicity-wise distinct, but also religious beliefs to the rest of Afghanistan, which has been one of the reasons behind the centuries of persecution that they've gone through. I've lived in Australia for about 12 years now. I came here as a teenager. Yeah, so Melbourne is home really for me now. So yeah, I'd say, you're talking to a Melbourneian Hazara at the moment.
But there's a huge community of Hazara in Melbourne,
Absolutely,
in particular.
Yeah, huge. It's grown quite significantly in the last 5-6 years, or maybe 10 years actually. So I think the first group of Hazaras would have come here in the late 90s, so 98, 99, as asylum seekers and refugees. And then from there on, there were more, family reunions, more migration. Obviously, as the situation, back in Afghanistan got worse, and they had to actually flee for their lives. So there's been centuries of persecution against the Hazara people in Afghanistan and Pakistan as well. Where that's forced people to unfortunately leave their homes behind and have to migrate to other places. Obviously, there's a positive sides to that because nowadays there's Hazaras everywhere, and they've established their lives, and there's beautiful communities everywhere. But the story behind story is quite sad because they were all forced to flee from their homes, really, because of the persecution that they went through. So some call it genocide that they've gone through for centuries.
But why is that? Is it because of religious differences then? And
I guess that question could, it's a really, I guess, broad question in a way as well, because think about all the persecutions that all the ethnic groups face. Why is that, right? I guess it's just human beings, I guess, they're just crazy sometimes, and, they don't like each other, I guess. But specifically about Hazaras, so the reason they're persecuted in Afghanistan is, one, they are believed by the majority ethnic group there, or the rest of, not all Afghanistan, but a good portion of people there, that they don't belong here. They're not. They just migrated here, or they took refuge here, I guess, and it's not their home, so they don't belong here. Yeah. That's one. But also racism, right? So thinking that Hazaras are not, they're equal, I guess. And also on top of that, there's the Shia sect of Islam is what Hazaras practice.
Yeah.
So there is two sects in Islam, Sunni and Shia. I'm not sure how much you guys know about this, but Hazaras are the Shia, which is again amongst the Muslim community, the minority, and then in Afghanistan even a smaller minority. So those are the main two reasons, and then obviously there is geopolitical stuff going on, and obviously the geographical location of Afghanistan, and how that has been the center for so many powers from around the world to kind of face each other. And then that's kind of added to that, to this, and manipulating like ethnic groups and putting them against each other. That's really my kind of take on this anyways, is that I think that people in Afghanistan are victims of powers, big powers around the world, where that's really become the battleground for them for generations. Yeah.
I guess when you're saying it's a battleground, it's sad because a whole population, a whole people for centuries and centuries have not felt psychological safety
Absolutely.
in their own home.
Just crazy, absolutely. So, like, just to your point, like, in terms of, it's not just obviously the physical safety of the people that suffer, which is obviously the hardest one, but also the consequences of that for generations to come, right? So, even the children of Hazaras who were born and raised in Australia still feel the pain of what their parents went through, right? So that's the psychological impact of that remains for generations. And I think what would be helpful is like to know, like maybe a brief history of how it all began in terms of how Hazaras started to get persecuted. If you guys don't mind,
please,
diving into that a little bit. So the common belief in Afghanistan is that Hazaras are the remainders of the Mongolian army that came and sort of conquered that region, Afghanistan being one of them. So this would have been about 700 years ago. And then when the Genghis Khan and the army left, the remainders of the Genghis army is who are Hazaras, which to an extent makes sense because there are common features amongst Hazaras with Mongolians, right? Yeah. But that's to a huge extent a myth and something that's not necessarily true, because there are so many other evidence in Afghanistan to prove that Hazaras were here, for thousands of years. One being the big Buddha, there's a province in Afghanistan, central Afghanistan, called Bamiyan, which has the world's largest Buddha, if I'm not mistaken, ever built in the history of humankind.
It's a rock carving.
Isn't
it? So in the mountains, just, I don't know, thousands of years ago.
Yes.
Carving.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah, man. So the history of that is that Afghanistan, when I was talking about strategically located, right? Like, the reason it is the battleground is because it's always been the link between Central Asia and the Indian continent, right? Yeah. So Central Asia, that, and also Iran and Middle East to an extent as well. And it's located right in the middle of Silk Road. Have you guys heard much about Silk Road? Yeah, so that was sort of the trade connection between the East and West, really, right? And Bamiyan, this province, was right in the heart of that on the Silk Road. So obviously, this is 1,000 years prior to Islam, even. So we're talking 2,000-3,000 years ago. That's when the Buddhas were built. So these huge, tall Buddhas that carved, alongside a hill, a rock, that is unfortunately now destroyed. But which there's a story behind that too, how it was all destroyed. But that's in the center of Hazara-Jat is what they call. Hazara-Jat is sort of the, how you've got stans like Afghanistan, Tajikistan, all that. Jat kind of means that, so it's the Hazaristan, I guess, or the Hazara-Jat.
Hazaristan.
Yeah.
Kastan means
the land
of, right?
That those people, I guess,
Right.
So Pakistan, land of the
Pakistan is another. The Pak actually means clean.
Clean.
Yeah, so the land of clean people is what that actually means, or clean, the land of clean, I guess.
Right.
Not there's no word people in there, but
so the others,
Pak
right?
means clean.
Tajik, land of the Tajikistan. Kyrgyzstan,
Okay.
so land
I never
of
knew that.
Kyrgyz people.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
And
all
so
those stands.
India could be called Hindustan.
It is called Hindustan.
Yeah, it's called Hindustan
Wow.
as well.
Yeah.
Right?
The more you learn.
The land of the Hindu people.
Yeah. So Australia could be Australistan.
Whiteystan? No, let's not go there.
Hey, watch out, man.
That's funny.
And so, dig in more about the Bamiyan, because it was destroyed by the Taliban. It got shot at and destroyed, I think, just the
so
base.
they wouldn't be able to destroy it by just shooting at it. So I think, because these are like massive Buddhas that are carved, in rock, right? And it took Taliban, proper effort and having to bring like, you know, specialists in like explosions from all over, you know, from like around in other parts of, you know, that region to actually destroy this, which is so sad because, you know, you're thinking of thousands of history, right? That's just destroyed. And, you know, the reason that they claim that behind their obviously atrocity there is that, you know, but it's a land of Islam, Muslims. What is a Buddha doing here, right? It's like, you know, being, I guess, you know, the Islamist or the fundamental kind of way of thinking. But the reality is that they wanted to destroy the history of Hazaras. They wanted to destroy the history of people that have lived in that region for, you know, thousands of years, to basically try and diminish whatever evidence there is to prove that these are indigenous people of that land, to further support their claim that they don't belong here. They are members of an invading army, and that, you know, this is not their home. So that's really the real reason behind why they destroyed this, and also to remove. You could imagine that this could be potentially be like the heart of tourism, and, you know, so many people from around the world wanting to go and see these Buddhas, right? Which the like of which doesn't exist anywhere in the world, right? We you know, that could help the local economy so much, and really be, you know, providing an environment that could help the Hazara people. Where this is their heartland, right? So taking that away from them, so there is no hope of economy being boosted in that region. You know, obviously destroying their history, all that. Yeah. So it's really because of the persecution and the hatred they had towards the Hazaras, and they have towards the Hazaras now, still to this date, that they destroyed it. But yeah, so that's a big evidence to prove that there were people like the Hazaras, or the Hazaras, you know, some of the Hazaras that are indigenous people of that land and have been there for thousands of years. They might have been mixed with other races that have, you know, passed through this region, like the Mongolian army, right, or other Central Asians. Like, very interesting. I was traveling through Thailand, and I met all these people from all the Istan countries, like Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, all that. That we look quite similar, right? Like I could pass as someone from Kyrgyzstan or Kazakhstan, and vice versa, right?
Yeah.
I was just telling you that you could pass as a Hazara, you know? So it makes sense that you know, there would have been other migration throughout that region.
Yeah.
And people have been mixed with Hazaras. Hazaras might not all come from one root.
Yeah.
But there are part of the, you know, Hazaras, or, you know, some of the Hazaras who definitely are, or probably the majority, that have been there for thousands of years, and that's their home.
So funny you mentioned that I could pull off or pass as a Hazara, right? Sure. When I was in Pakistan, I think I was in Karachi at the time, so south of the country, and some guy was talking to me. He's like, "Are you from Afghanistan, or are you from Gilgit?" Like
Gilgit,
the north of Pakistan, close to the Chinese border. Because he looked at me, he looked at my eyes, obviously, and he's like, "We've got the same eyes."
Was he? Did he look?
He said
had
he was
Asian
from,
features as
yeah,
well?
he had Asian features, and he said, "Look, I'm from Afghanistan," and he, now knowing, he must have been Hazara man.
Yeah, or an Uzbek as well. Uzbek also have Asian features as well, so they're a fourth ethnic minority in Afghanistan, but quite likely Hazaras. Yeah, because you look more Hazara than you look Uzbek, in my opinion.
So the funny thing about being Asian is you've got an Asian radar, right?
Yeah.
Do you have that as well? So can you tell, oh, that person is Chinese, or you can make safer assumptions?
You can make assumptions.
So, oh yeah, they look Korean or Vietnamese or Hazara.
Now I can even tell that now.
Yeah.
Having lived in Australia amongst the Asian community, and having a lot of friends from so many different Asian backgrounds, like, you know, Chinese, Vietnamese, all that, I can actually tell the difference between most of Asians. Even the Australian raised and born Asians, like I can still tell.
Yeah.
Which is interesting, right? But yeah, going back to Hazaras, right? Like, I think one of the reasons you would have been picked as Hazara or someone from Afghanistan in Pakistan is because there is actually a huge influx of migrants coming into Pakistan from Afghanistan, and because it's on the border, right? There's also Pakistani Hazaras too, so there is there's a quite a noticeable population or group of people in Pakistan that are also Hazaras. They would have migrated there, I think, in the last 200-300 years, maybe.
So tell me about your time in Pakistan. You lived there for a couple of years.
Yes, I did. Maybe after the phone goes off.
Sorry, guys.
That's okay.
Just some interruption. I get so good now.
Yeah, Pakistan. So I was born in Afghanistan during the Civil War, okay, in the early 90s. This is the bloodiest war that Afghanistan has ever experienced in its history. Right before the takeover of Afghanistan, or the complete takeover of Afghanistan by the Taliban, the first time they came around. This right now they're in control again.
Yeah.
But this is the first time they came. So around that time, I was born, and I was born during the Civil War, and then kind of like as I was a few years old, Taliban managed to take over the entire Afghanistan, which forced my family, being a Hazara, to flee.
Wow.
So become refugees.
Yeah.
We went to Pakistan, and that's where I lived for a few years, early years of my life. One of the reasons I speak Urdu is also because I was kind of raised there for a few years. I went to primary school in Pakistan too. So yeah, it was a tough time, man, for the family, for sure, because you're thinking, I'm part of a big, massive family, so I've got a lot of siblings.
How many?
I'm one of 9.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
You're
big
one of
family.
9.
Yeah.
Incredible. You don't hear that much in a
No.
modern context, especially in an Australian context.
Yeah, no, you don't, yeah. Yeah, it's 1 of 9.
Where are you on the
Interesting.
pecking order?
I'm second youngest.
The baby.
The baby. And the
One of the
youngest son.
babies.
Yeah, I've got a younger sister, but yeah, it was interesting to be raised in a massive family like that. Pros and cons for sure.
But, okay, so escaping from Afghanistan
Yeah.
in the mid-90s? Late 90s?
Yes, mid-90s.
Your parents, 1 and 9 children,
Yes.
fled across the border.
Dad was Dad. We didn't even know where Dad was. So Dad was, at the time, he was in the north of Afghanistan doing. So he was part of he's got a background of himself in terms of working in the government administration in Afghanistan. So he was a known person, I guess, in the community, and there was a lot of risks associated with being a Hazara, known person in the community. You're kind of the first target.
Yeah.
And at the time, he was in the north of Afghanistan for work, and we were geographically separated from him. Meaning, and this is a time where there's no, telecommunication. There's nothing, so there's no way of actually knowing whether he's alive or not.
Yeah.
He was in Mazar-e-Sharif, which is an area where right around that time was a huge massacre that happened against Hazaras. So there's thousands of Hazaras were massacred by the Taliban, and my dad was in that. So we didn't know whether he's alive or not. And this is the rest of the family who were forced to flee and went to Pakistan. Yeah. So, and then obviously growing up in Pakistan, and the family, as undocumented refugees, I guess, because you just cross the border and you're just running for your life. Lived there for a few years until the fall of Taliban again in 2001.
Yeah.
That's when we returned back. So it was safe enough, relatively safe for the family to go back. Then life kind of took a turn, and it was a couple of easier years of me growing up there. Learning a bit of English and going to school and all that, getting the early sort of education until I came to Australia in 2011 again. So lived in Afghanistan again for about 9 years or so after we returned.
But where did you land in Pakistan with
English?
your family?
Oh, sorry? Where did I?
Yeah, in Pakistan, where?
Peshawar,
Peshawar.
Yeah.
Okay, across the border.
right across the border.
So was there a lot of Hazara there community with you and going
Refugees.
to school as well? Did you feel different in a brand new land? And how were the people? Were they welcoming?
Yeah.
Did you get bullied for being Hazara or anything like that?
Yeah, for sure. Look, it's a interesting question because it makes me kind of like takes me back to those years, and and especially now, having lived the life I've lived and where I am, and to just really think about those years. So racism was a big thing for sure because when you look so different to everyone else around you, and you're one of the very few, or maybe sometimes the only one, you're obviously going to be picked on, right? Yeah. Especially if you're in an environment where there's kids and there's more risks of that. So in primary school, for sure, I was the only child that looked different to everyone else, which was an interesting year or so. Obviously it wasn't a fun time for me in primary school. But generally, I think because we are refugees and living in Pakistan, we're undocumented, there's always the risk of being deported back to Afghanistan. So, it's not an easy life, man. For me, it wasn't too bad because I'm just a child and, I don't really feel it the way everyone else or the adults in the family felt. But yeah, I know for a fact that, everyone else had it tough for sure. But because we are a strong family and, there's a lot of us, so labor was there, right? Like we had a workforce to be able to actually, bring food to the table, which was through rag making. Yeah, so my family made rugs. So a lot of these beautiful handmade rugs you see probably in the Western world, it would have been made by people like my family who lived in Pakistan as refugees, and that was their means of bringing food to the table. So beautiful rugs.
And you would have to hustle day and night just to get rugs out, and it's a whole family business by the sounds of it.
Well, I don't know if business is the right word for it, but it was really enough to kind of like survive, really.
Get food on the table, eat the food next. Pay rent. It's hand to mouth, right?
Exactly. Especially having living in a society where it's so different to where you come from. Now there's electricity and gas and bills and water bills and rent and all that, so that you have to pay for. And being undocumented doesn't help because you probably don't get best prices there, right? You know what I mean? Like as some, you're basically given an opportunity to live there, and all you can do is work really hard so you can earn enough to cover your expenses. Most of my siblings and family would have worked 15-16 hours a day making rugs 6 days a week.
Sheesh. And did you get reconnected with your father?
Yes. So dad then he basically escaped. So he managed to escape from the massacre. Walked for days in the mountains.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that's a story in itself.
That's crazy.
So he managed to basically flee and get to join us in Pakistan. Wow. Yeah.
Did he ever share that story with you, like in detail, or?
I've never actually sat down and had a really deep conversation with him about this, because it's not easy for him to have those conversations. But I've heard bits and pieces here and there about his escape. Maybe one day. I'm encouraging him to actually write a book about it.
That would be amazing.
Yeah.
He's a poet, a writer.
Wow.
And so he's the right guy for it. I think definitely. He really needs to write his story.
I'm curious to ask, you're reflecting on the past and your experiences. Like you said, when you were a kid, you couldn't really understand what was going on and how everyone was feeling. But now that you're an adult, how does it feel, looking back and just reimagining and putting yourself in that position again?
A very good question. It's hard because obviously there's so much that happens every day that occupies you, obviously, with that, and life changes, right? When life changes, you change and you evolve, your emotions change, you become a different person every day, basically. So for me, it's not easy to even think about it or even remember how I felt, right? Because it's so distant. The memory is so distant. But I know it wasn't easy because so there are memories, or not easy memories to even.
Of course.
So I think my mind probably like sometimes even like just blocks it.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And I think a lot of people, that's their sort of coping mechanism, I think, to just kind of like, with the past, you kind of forget about it, do you know what I mean? Or intentionally in a way.
Yeah.
I guess my mind, maybe that works that way. I don't know about others, but so it's hard for me to even imagine myself being there anymore because I've lived here for a while now. And I've got a very different life now. And that's also contributing as well,
But it's the stories of migration, of being a refugee and being an asylum seeker, the ripple effects of that trauma to escape, to bring 9 of your kids across a border. And that would have been, how long would that journey have been from your hometown to land in Peshawar?
A few hours, maybe like look, the kilometer was not much, but you're talking about fleeing for your lives, where like there's every few hundred meters there's a Taliban checkpoint. The cars would have been like really old and slow, and the roads would have been in really bad condition, and so I think it would have taken them like a day or two. I don't remember much because I was really young, but returning back I do remember it. In 2001, I believe. That's so by then the road would have developed and Taliban had gone, so the journey back would have I guess took us less. I think it maybe like at least 10-12 hours, I think, of the total Arab journey. But 12 hours, if it would have taken them a day or two, would have been a day or two of hell, I guess.
And what triggered the move back?
To Afghanistan?
To Afghanistan, because you've gone out to escape and you've set up a new life. But you realized Peshawar wasn't, or your family realized
you haven't
that
really set up a new life because you're just living there undocumented, temporarily. No permission to go to school. You can't officially, formally work there. You got at any chance of being caught and being deported back to Afghanistan. And how can you ever settle in a situation like that, right? So this is not your home, right? So we always knew that we got to get out of there somehow. We just hadn't had the opportunity yet. Then Afghanistan, the 9/11 happened, right? And then the US invaded Afghanistan and pushed the Taliban back, and with the local uprising, took control of Afghanistan again and established a new government, right? So, and then they said, all right, everybody is welcome back. So relative democracy, I guess. So that kind of enabled, all refugees from Afghanistan to return back, including my family. So we just wanted to go back home. And then just when we went back in a few years, it was good. It was all right, but then same thing slowly started to get worse again. But the second time I actually came to Australia on a student visa, so initially I just wanted to come and study here. But once I got here, then the situations in Afghanistan started to get worse and worse and worse. So that slowly made the situation too difficult for my family to stay, and we slowly brought them over here. So now everyone is in Melbourne.
Were you the first one in Australia?
One, no, my brother came around the same time that we went back to, how I told you that we were basically waiting for an opportunity to get out of Pakistan, right? One avenue that we that my brother took upon himself was to get out and enable enable a situation for the family to get out, and he actually came to Australia as a refugee himself. So he was here already, dealing with all these freaking TPV and all that back then too, in the early 2000s, because Australian government had a similar policy against the asylum seeker, temporary protection visa. So where there's just been a great news lately that there's an avenue for them to get permanent visas. But so this is about what I'm talking about now. But my brother would have dealt with this 20 years ago.
Wow.
Same thing. So that meant that his future was really unknown, and he was just dealing with that himself. But my family, we were able to return. But yeah, from then on, so I was the second person to come a few years later. The family was still okay living there because they had just returned home, and they were hoping that Afghanistan is rebuilt again. But obviously that wasn't the case.
There's always a hope and a romanticism of your homeland as well, that things will get better. Yeah.
See, I'm struggling to even deal with this word homeland, to be honest, because as someone who was forced to live there when I was 4 or 5 years old, then had like an opportunity to come back live there for a few years, and then come to Australia and raised here. Like, if you were in that situation, like where would home be for you? Right? So, and that's why I'm like, homeland, you're right. Like, I don't know if I can call Afghanistan homeland anymore for myself, right? Probably family would be different. I still love, the culture, the people, and I think it is, it's incredibly misrepresented in the West. And it's the only image that people have about Afghanistan is, big turban, long beard with a gun, I'm talking about vast majority of people. I'm sure not everyone, but it's not true, right? There's culture, there's history, there is this, man, like a book I'm reading these days called The Lost Enlightenment. It talks about the lost enlightenment in that region, right? So not just Afghanistan, Central Asia, and all that region,
Iraq, Syria.
The amount of wisdom and knowledge and all that were there during a time where, like, there wasn't much anywhere else in the world really, including the West, right? So it would have been the center of civilization and research, and a lot of these. And I highly encourage anyone to listen to this book. It's incredible. Or listen or read. I'm listening it on audiobook because it's easier. But yeah, so this is the history of it, which is unfortunately not what you first think of when you hear the word Afghanistan, which is sad, right?
Yeah. But the region is the center of science for the world for so long. I think mathematics
was all born there.
Was born there, and you've got libraries and culture of learning in
astronomy
areas like
as well.
Damascus, in Baghdad, all those regions.
Absolutely.
Right? And all the rich libraries that have been burnt down over the centuries.
Yeah.
And
it's sad.
It seems like people, for the control of power, for oppression, just likes to burn knowledge, burn history.
Yeah,
shoot down history, bomb history.
Yeah.
So what we're talking about now is just an ugly part of human nature, the ugliest.
So true. Yeah, it's so sad. Yeah, and it's the human side is often neglected when these atrocities happen around the world. Like, I hear on the news often when all these so-called I don't know what under another word, like the people that like go on TVs and talk about stuff and they think they're experts. What would you call them? What are they? I don't know, speakers, I guess. Yeah,
speakers.
Yeah. So they the expert of that region, I guess. So they talk about
foreign correspondents
and this and that.
Yeah.
And when they talk about why was the US involved in all this and who the Taliban are and what happens to, I'm like, it's so sad when you talk about all that, but you often neglect the human side of it all. Is that people like me, right? Generations and generations of people, that have nothing to do with any of this, and they're just forced to be in that, stuck in the middle of all that. It's just really sad, and to think about what's happening to Afghanistan right now. Like you guys would know about the recent withdrawal of the US.
Yeah, tell us about it.
Yeah, so in 2021, I think, August 21, I think, that's when the US, after 20-ish years of being in Afghanistan, just packed up and left everything behind, which obviously caused the huge influx of people wanting to like run away and get out of the country. All that happened, which enabled the Taliban to come and take over again. So back to ground zero, back to where my family was forced to flee in the mid 90s, which is just crazy to think about. People like children, who it often reminds me, okay, there's children like you right now in there that you felt, what I was going through 20 years ago. There are people that are going through it right now, and the Taliban have taken control, and now they've banned. Obviously, persecution is going on, but they've banned girls from attending school.
Yeah.
And I don't even want to talk about it because it's it's crazy.
Does that inspire you to bring change? Does it inspire you to use your energy, use your experience, your lived experience of escaping oppression?
Yeah.
And you've come to an Australia where it's being redefined as your new home, right? Your heart is in Melbourne, in Carlton.
Yeah. I think it's what that has done, I think, to me is it's just been a remarkable educational experience of who I am as a human being and how I feel about not just the Hazaras, not just the people from that region, but about humanity, right? Yeah. So, what I feel and how I feel about humankind in general, right? I think beyond. That's why when you told me about homeland, right? Like it's really difficult for me because, to me, my mind nowadays just goes a lot beyond us, geographical borders of a location, to think, oh, this is your home, right? Like when I think about humanity, I think about the planet. I think about everyone, right? Like no matter where we're on the corner of this world we live in. So I think it has had to do the upbringing, the experiences that I've had, like having been a refugee, in the early 90s or mid 90s. And how and then having to migrate to Australia and lived here, and obviously those experiences, the persecution that my family and I felt, I think it's just been like this journey of education and learning and really shaping who I am as a person now, which is really to bring change, to your point about, wherever I can, positive change in anyone's life, right? Like sometimes I just sit down in a bar and talk to someone about something, and in a few hours, and I feel like, okay, there's a lot of knowledge that we can share here, and that I've actually, like, information that I've passed on that has really changed someone's opinion about someone from the region that I come from, which. Something like that. It's easier, as simple as having a conversation with someone. Really, like if I can just change that, and I think I've done part of what I want to do. Right? It's like small steps, small bits, small changes.
Of course,
that's what makes me the happiest. Really, like this conversation. Really, like something like this, where we're just obviously passing information that otherwise wouldn't necessarily be, you wouldn't be exposed to it, really, like, unless you met someone that had this experience and went through all this.
Exactly. So you guys are part of CMY and the youth-led unit.
Yes.
So how do you want to create impact and change?
Yeah, good question. So, yeah, me and Liam, we are part of the committee of management for a youth-led unit, which is basically a bunch of young people, visionary young people that are, wanting to create meaningful change in our society, in Australia, Melbourne, and beyond. And I think we're still in the early sort of stages of all this. I think we're really harnessing to his point. Always uses this word, harnessing each other's energy, and really like the vision or the long term goal is being embedded amongst us. I think it's early stages, but my personal opinion is that we are, whether within this group or broader, or is to create awareness amongst the wider Australian society, build bridges amongst communities, and create love,
of course,
where you can. So, and I think the opposite to everything that in terms of the persecution, the hardship, all that we discussed, the opposite to all that is love. I think in amongst humanity. And as long as we can create that love and care, it's a solution to a lot of those problems, I guess. So that's really how I envision it. But in terms of practical stuff, I think it's there's a lot going on. Like, for instance, one point that I always talk to you guys is the lack of connection between small communities and the small community organizations and some of the broader community organizations that have been established in Australia for a little while. So these, obviously, the community organizations, are there to help the communities and connect and do all this community work. But sometimes I think it's the smaller community organizations that are true representation of those people. Like, let's say, the Hazara. There's so many community organizations amongst the Hazara people in Australia. They hardly have any, they hardly are even known by the bigger community organizations, right? I think that's where the meaningful change can really happen, right? Because they understand those communities better than anyone else. If you're trying to help those communities, the best way is to actually work with these small community organizations that are doing that voluntarily anyways. So I think that's really something that I want to, of course, a point that I want to start. And then we'll see where this takes us. But big visions for sure.
It's similar to the Okiru journey, I would say. We are young people with a lot of energy that is yearning and desiring change. Change in the way that we connect with the world around us, to focus on, I guess, our experiences and our journeys to create better for ourselves and everyone around us. So that could all sound like a lot of nothing for some people, right? But the feeling is that we are building something that's greater than ourselves. But at the same time, we are building ourselves up as well. The capability building, the capacity building to inform ourselves, to really broaden our horizons and add more skills to the table so that we are in a better position to help us, help change the world, help make it a better place. By making it more inclusive, to welcoming different voices, different people of different backgrounds.
It's amazing. I really admire you guys for doing the work that you guys do here in Okiru. First of all, I love the branding. And it's just like the name is so catchy. So as soon as I saw it, I'm like, I want to check this out. What is this all about? Not even knowing it's a podcast, right? But look, the intention behind it all, the visions that you guys have for it, and also taking it very easy in terms of really thinking, okay, this is a process of us building ourselves up, right? In the process of trying to help our community, our people, and providing a platform for people to come and and talk and tell their people how they feel and who they are and what they are and what they believe. And I think it's a gap, I think, in the amongst the multicultural community in Australia. Among Australians in general, like there's not a lot of like not that I know of platforms or podcasts where it's a lot more common in the US, and I think from my experiences. So I think for sure, there's a gap for it in the community, and it's great. I like it.
Yeah.
All we're doing is we're just having a yarn.
Exactly.
Right? We're just having
podcast,
a chat.
That's what podcast is, though. Yeah.
We're just having a yarn. We just want to hear your story because it's so different from each and our upbringings.
Exactly.
As well. So there's a thread there. We spoke about homeland and the feeling of home, but geographically home as well. But we've heard your take. I'm curious about Jasper as well. What does home mean to you? Is it a region? Is it a feeling?
Yeah, wow. That's a great question. I think with having these conversations, everyone has their own perspective of what home is, right? Sometimes it's where you're born, where you're brought up. Sometimes it's that chosen home, right? Like for yourself, you didn't find, I guess, Afghan, your homeland, right? But now you're finding Melbourne as your home. Is that correct?
I think it's probably like maybe the village that I was born in and like that region and all that. Like that still gives me homeland feeling when I'm there. When the last time I was there, but I think Melbourne is more home for me now, just because I've lived here for 12-ish years, and that's kind of been the most crucial years of my life of who I've become. Yeah. So I think I feel more home in Melbourne than anywhere else. Yeah. But but I understand sort of your point of view as well. It's like not limited to geographical location, right? Necessarily. Yeah. And is that what you're trying to say? Or
well, like what I'm trying to get at is everyone's perspective of home is different, right? And I guess for me, home is that feeling of safety where I find peace, where I can really be who I am, a place where you feel nurtured as well, right? There's times when I considered my parents' place not as home because I didn't feel nurtured, I didn't feel safe. But building that relationship, I can call it another home, right? Yeah. I call my home right now is with my partner where we live, right? That's my home. I can call Malaysia second home as well because I felt nurtured, I felt at peace, I felt safe. Yeah. Right? So I guess for me, home is where I feel safe. Yeah. Where I feel at peace, where I can feel I can be myself. Home felt like JP's house because I felt at home there. One of my best mates. I felt like home there because I felt nurtured. I felt at peace. I felt safe. Yeah. Anywhere I feel at peace, where I feel safe, I can call home. So I guess really like home is that feeling for me. Yes. I attach that for me.
No, that makes sense. Where would home be for you?
I always come back to Footscray. Right. That's the geography because look, I was born and raised here. Yeah. In Sunshine Hospital, actually, which is stone's throw away from here. Yeah. But Footscray, I just remember old memories of me and my mum, my sister, and my next door neighbour actually just taking the bus out and cruising around, walking around, getting banh mi, getting iced coffees or sugarcane drink, and I've travelled the world. I've been to Pakistan and Iran and all these far-fetched places. But every time I come back here, I do feel just the feeling of belonging. And the magic of Footscray is that it's so welcoming as well. There's each wave of migration, Footscray becomes a home to a new population from your Europeans. Very early on in the 60s to your Vietnamese and your Indian and African communities as well. Like I can go to any place there and start speaking Vietnamese to the store owners or the store assistants. And that feeling for me is the ability to connect in a way beyond the surface level as well. And that's what home feels to me. Right. But beyond that, I can go to India and I could feel at home. I think it's my ability to find that safety very quickly and to be able to adapt to new worlds to pick up a language and go, hey, baya, ekjai.
Yeah, see, that's the thing though, like about humankind, right? Like this feeling of belonging, right, to a geographical place, or to an area, or to a place that you would have been raised, or you just happen to be born in where you're born, right? And that happens to become your home. But when you really think about it, like, I think we're so adaptable. So, as human beings, we have to be, right? When you think about human evolution of how we got to where we are, obviously we have had to been adaptable, right, to wherever we are, I guess. So that's similar to what you said, like, no matter where in the world you are, and similar to what you said, as long as you've got peace, it does become your home, which is, I think, the main reason Melbourne has become home for me. I live in Carlton North, which is one of the most beautiful spots, I think, in Melbourne. So I can't complain about anywhere else being my home than that Rathlin Street where I live in. It's like the place. Every time I go overseas and come back, and just I have to do that drive from the beginning of Rathlin till the end, and just think to myself, be like, okay, it's this. You're just feeling blessed for having what I have and living where I live, especially coming from the background that I come from, and knowing that all of this could not be there in a split of a second. So just living in that moment, taking it all in. So yeah, home is anywhere you want it to be home, really.
And how would your parents answer that question?
Oh, definitely Afghanistan for them. Definitely their village, and the places they've been. Like, mum always, like, an hour of conversations with mum, 40 minutes would be about Afghanistan. Like, it's upbringing, life, everything they know, everything they love. Obviously families here, but in terms of friends and upbringing, all that, their lifetime was spent there, built there. So their life was built there. So yeah, for them it'll be for sure Afghanistan. Yeah.
And how would you articulate that feeling? Because yes, they've been brought up there. It's their connection to that land as well, and for many generations, I'm assuming, right?
Yeah.
And so once that's taken away from you, and the feeling of romanticism of the land that you can no longer access as well, it's the poignant feeling of it's a bit sad, but is there a hope that she can return there?
Look, you never say never, I guess. Hoping that Afghanistan is safe enough for us to, even if I want to just go travel, and go visit, even if we don't want to go live there, but having the freedom to and access, because we still have home and land and everything there. So yeah, I hope one day she can, for sure. But just in terms of homeland, like my dad, for example, I was telling you that he's a poet. Like, he was just showing me a poem the other day that he wrote about the village that we're from, called Sarchishma, which means spring, like spring where the water comes out, like that spring. And it's a beautiful mountainous valley, like it's a valley basically. It's 3-4 valleys, but one main valley. And it's just magical. Have you been to North Island in New Zealand?
No, not yet.
So is it North or South? South Island, sorry, South Island.
Yeah.
It's very similar region to South Island of New Zealand in terms of the nature there. And he has written a poem, and he was just reading me that poem, and through those, it's in Farsi, right? And through the poem, I could feel like, just how much love and care that he's got for that place, right? And basically, in a way, the poem was really surrounds his feeling of him basically missing his homeland, or that where he's from, and praising the beauties that it has, and how destiny has separated them both. It's kind of a bit of a Rumi and Shams kind of like.
I was about to say, because Farsi has a long history of incredible poets,
Absolutely.
right? And Rumi is like one of the biggest names.
Central Asia. So this, it's obviously the lost enlightenment that I was telling you about. A big part of it is focused around the philosophers and the poets and the dervishes that lived in that region. Yeah, and amazing poets like Rumi, like Hafiz, like Firdausi, like there's too many to count, like amazing poets, and I am biased, but I really think that the Farsi poetry is unmatched. Maybe I don't understand poetry in English, but I don't get the same feeling when I read Farsi poetry versus English.
So what is your community and your Hazara community of this young generation of your mates, right? Because you live in a share house with a bunch of them. And I remember you telling me a story how the neighbors have complimented you on your singing. And I see in the Instagram stories that you guys would just get together and somebody with a guitar and maybe you're just sipping whiskey or something like that and you'd just be singing. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so because obviously the big community of Hazaras in Australia, that means that there is this young generation that are also, kind of like calling Australia home, Melbourne home, and being raised here really. So, doing whatever they're doing, in whatever profession they're in, I guess. Yes, and it's very interesting because we often talk about this amongst me and my friends, is that we've created this new culture now, right? It is a mixture of obviously being a Hazara and where we come from, our identity, right? And then having lived in Australia and for a while, and being a teenager and obviously like growing into adults, and and it's fundamental years of your life where you're exposed to so much information. You're taking all it in and becoming who you become. Your personality is being shaped, right? So, and having that lived experience together with each other has enabled us to create this new culture, which this is the way I think about it, right? We are Hazara-Australians living in Melbourne, and so if you come hang out with us, you can clearly tell, okay, these guys, this is the Australian influence in here, but you can see there's a Middle East in here, but you also see that they've got some, like the Asian in them in terms of who they are, I guess. So there's a mixture of so many different things, so many cultures. Yeah, and we love it, man. Like Melbourne is home now. So I just live with one other Hazara housemate actually. But yeah, so it's but it's amazing group of friends. Most of whom are same background as I am, and yeah, we love it.
How about the singing?
Oh yeah, so a lot of good singers. So my friend group. A lot of them love music. They're big into the music, Eastern music. So you would have probably heard that in India or Pakistan when you traveled, maybe.
Do you guys jam?
Harmonia.
The harmonium.
Yeah, so harmonium, and there's a instrument called dambura, which is 2 strings. It's like a guitar, but has 2 strings only. So that's a really. That's sort of a very historical Hazara musical instrument. It's not just Hazaras. I've noticed that in a lot of other Central Asian countries, they also play the same instrument, which is fascinating for me. I'm like, okay, these are some trends that I'm realizing. Like, why is it that all this group of people, they're being so distant from each other, have similar food, similar music instruments, things like that. So it's that, and then obviously the Western instruments as well. Like some of the boys have learned like guitar and all that. So we get together, play music, they sing. Yeah, so you hang out. Yeah, it's good.
All right, we should visit for a jam session.
100%.
Absolutely, you guys are welcome.
Gerald's an amazing singer and guitarist.
There we go. Cool. Yeah, done. You guys should definitely come. Yeah,
100%.
Come hang out. Yeah, it'd be lovely.
And the concept that you've developed, we've actually spoken about it on the podcast with Kevin, with Kano, with Rosie as well. It's your original culture that comes from and is passed down from your parents, right? But there's another culture that is ever present. It's all around you and you're absorbing it in your everyday life, right? That Australian culture. And you're marrying that up together and it's become like a third culture for you.
Yeah.
Right? You've got your Hazara background. But you've got this Aussie-ness in you as well. And it's just forming this beautiful, beautiful mix. So this third culture.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially it's different with you guys because you were born here and we came here as you know, teenagers, right?
True.
So there, it's a bit of a difference. And the reason I say that is because I see the Hazaras that are born here is not the same. So the culture that we have amongst me and my friends is very unique.
Wow.
In a way that's not even the same with the Hazaras that are born and raised here, even those that came here children. That there's a gap. There's a connection is not. It's not necessarily the same. Like I went to high school here and went to uni and I had friends from all you know, so many different cultures and backgrounds. But I think this connection always kind of like is a lot easier for me to make with the guys that have had similar experiences with me.
Yeah.
And I think it's probably the same for a lot of people, where the cultural kind of you know, the similar culture kind of bring you together. But yeah, so I think it's the mixture of your own culture, but then you're obviously living in Australia, right? And you know, it's beautiful parts of Aussie culture that we have adapted to, and you know, and we love it because it's now who we are, right? So that's Hazara-Australian. Like when I was traveling around Southeast Asia with my group of friends, we all kind of like look similar and, you know, we dress similar and we walk around and we sound similar, and people are like, you sound Aussie, but you don't sound Aussie. Like you say certain words in Australian accent, but certain words not. And you guys speak this random other language in the middle of it, and you all look the same. And but you look from obviously the Central Asia, but you guys are like so westernized in terms of your manners. What's going on? Like people would really get confused as to where we are from.
Yeah,
and then and exactly to the third culture bit, right? It's the third culture is there's a huge group of people that are creating these new cultures, and I think that it's fascinating. It would be fascinating to see the future of Australian culture, how it evolves, right?
That's a question that I'm digging into these days. What does it mean to become or be an Australian? Because of this experience of being an Australian is so different across this country of ours.
Yeah.
Right? Obviously, your First Nations communities, the original custodians of the land. And to live here for 60,000 years plus, and then have just these boats come filled with white men, bringing their clothes and their weapons and their diseases, and just feeling that sense of ownership just being taken away and being oppressed and killed and the wars, right? And then many waves of migration afterwards. There's been Afghan people in Australia. Have you heard of the
Cameliers?
The Cameliers. Yeah, what year were they here?
They would have been here in the early 1900s, I think, if I'm not mistaken, mid 1900s.
Yeah, so my understanding was
1950s,
that the British brought over Afghan Cameliers with their camels over to support discovery of Australia because of the land was so vast to take, I don't know, I'm assuming taking their horses and things wouldn't have done so. Please.
So I know a bit about the history of it because being from Afghanistan, obviously, originally. So they built the Ghan, which is the railway that connects Adelaide to Darwin. It's called the Ghan after the name Afghan, right? This is during a time where British colonization was taking place around the world, including Indian subcontinent, including Pakistan, and there was wars in Afghanistan going on as well. So they had control over parts of Afghanistan, which meant they brought these men with their camels as essentially slaves to Australia to basically help British built the railway, and because they, you can imagine the desert within Australia. Camels would be the best animals to be able to travel that distance, because their horses couldn't actually travel the same distance. So the camels would help them a lot with that. So they got these people to build that, and then some of those Cameleers actually remained here, and because of the racism that were happening back then, they weren't allowed to. There's no interracial marriage allowed or anything like that. So and there were no women that were brought. So there was all men. So they only got assimilated into the indigenous culture. So there is a lot of indigenous people with Afghan blood.
Wow.
Yeah, I've actually met some indigenous Afghans.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, so they're far. It's just so funny. So their name is James, but they're like, oh yeah, I'm James. My dad was David, and then my grandfather was Musa or Muhammad, or and
Wow.
it's incredible.
But what's their story like?
Yeah.
I've never had an opportunity to actually sit down and have a deep conversation with an indigenous Afghan. I encourage you guys to find some and have them on the podcast.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's. There's some interesting documentaries about this. You guys can dig around for it.
Yeah.
Because this is 150 years ago, so it's like the second or even third generation. So I think that identity is quite significantly lost, unless you can find, older people maybe, like they probably would still remember their grandfather, for example, that would only speak the whatever dialect of Afghanistan they spoke, or still praying because they were all Muslim, devoted Muslims. There's a mosque in Adelaide, so Australia's oldest mosque that was built by the Cameleers.
Wow.
And it's important to note that these weren't only people from Afghanistan. There were also a lot of Indian Cameleers as well.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, they're not really talked about as much. But yeah, so there was Afghans surely amongst them. So yeah, Australia has a very long history with Afghanistan. They would have most likely belonged to the other ethnic groups in Afghanistan, not Hazaras.
Yeah.
Just because we didn't deal with camels, maybe.
And so we're talking about the Australian identity, right? And the Afghan Cameleers who would come here, or the Chinese people that came here during the gold rush.
Yeah.
Right, and you go to Bendigo, and there's just Chinese culture everywhere.
Absolutely.
Right, and it's so beautiful and incredible. But then you go all the way to, I don't know, Outback Australia, or you go to Broome.
Yeah.
I have not been there, but all the way northwest, right? What's the experience of a person there? What does it mean to be an Australian person for that person? Because we're here in Melbourne, we've got this melting pot of cultures and identity, and it's a beautiful mix. And you can go eat any cuisine you want anywhere, right? Or you can go to Cairns or Cape Tribulation it's just so remote.
Yes.
As well. What does it mean to be an Australian for them?
Yeah, probably significantly different, just because of the facts that you just mentioned, right? Like, I go camping a lot, and I like off-roading, and so that means rural Victoria, rural Australia, and that just witnessing the culture there, and then you coming to a place like Footscray and witnessing the culture here is vastly different, and I think it's just harnessing those differences, and I think it's just finding, obviously, because they're all beautiful, and just if you just focusing on the beauties of it all, and the fact that we are able to all, be so different, but at the same time identify as one. I think that's beautiful. This is something that places like Afghanistan unfortunately don't have, which is why those stuff happens, right? Where people don't get along for some reason, and I think. So it's amazing to see that in Australia, for the most part, people do feel welcomed and are appreciated, regardless of what background or ethnicities or heritage they come from. But again, like the question I have for you is that how do you see all of this evolve in terms of the Australian culture? Like, do you think we're going in the right direction or otherwise?
I think we're at a junction. I feel we have the opportunity to progress and heal, because the history of this country started through colonization, and a part of our population feels like they've lost all sovereignty, right? The Indigenous and the First Nations community make up 4% of our population. They were here first, but all they want to do is they want to change a date, right? That's one issue. We've got Australia Day, which is on the 26th of January each year, and that's the day that the first fleet landed into Botany Bay, marking the start of the invasion for that community. And for it to be called Australia Day, when our first Australians felt that that was the start of their oppression, why don't we just move it, right?
Yeah, it's a big deal.
It's a big deal for them, but for the rest of us, it's like, all right, it's a day.
What's the big deal with moving the date? Like,
What's the big deal?
Yeah,
Exactly. Right? Just move it to the day after. And that would...
yeah. Especially knowing that it was on a Thursday, I'm like, make it Friday so I have a long weekend.
True.
But things like this is blocking us from forming a united Australian identity, I feel. Because there's a song, "We are one, but we are many," right? And that song feels like we're all one Australian, but we can't do that until we all are on a similar journey. So I think we're making great strides and steps forward, but I guess our relationship with our First Nations it feels like we're stuck.
Yeah, and that's such a good point. And on top of that, I think it's also the hardship and the experiences that Indigenous people actually still have in Australia to this date. When you really think about that, it's really sad, right? Like, I was watching a debate on ABC the other day, I think Q&A, when there was an Indigenous person there speaking about these government policies that have been around, especially on imposing policies on Indigenous people for generations. It was really interesting point of view. She was saying COVID was the first time that general Australians really felt the Australian government imposing a policy, right? Indigenous people have been experiencing that for generations, right? This is, and it made me, like, it was really awakening for me. I'm like, okay, so think about being from, the Indigenous community where all these policies are being imposed on you, whether, obviously, whether they're good or bad policies is a different conversation to have, but it's just why do they have to go through all this? Well, while they were just here for thousands of years, living sustainable life, and now, they have to go through all this, which is all brought with everyone else that came here afterwards, right? So yeah, I don't know. Like, I honestly, I know the problem. Obviously, the problem exists, but in terms of fixing and healing and all that, I think we need to start. Start somewhere, I guess. And the day would probably be a good start.
Yeah, it would be a good start. But yeah, these are the big questions where it's so hard to answer, the big philosophical questions, right? Because Australia was here before all of us got here, and it will continue to exist well after we're gone as well. Do you have anything to add?
No, I'm just thinking about that. Like, I don't know where to start, right? Like, it's such a huge, I guess, big task to do, and Like I'm just a man that's like even struggling to survive as well sometimes. So it's kind of like, where do I start? You know, do I start with myself, or how do I put an impact to the community as well? How can I just make a difference in a little way?
So these conversations like this, right?
Yeah.
So the fact that we three of us from being one and many, because being many, right, from different cultures living in Australia, sitting down and talking about these, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, I think that in itself is making a difference. Like you are supposed to just getting on with their, I don't know, the daily lives, dealing with whatever we are dealing with. I think this is a contribution. Like if everyone talks about these stuff and it tries to educate people that don't necessarily know or even understand or feel, and I think we still slowly make a change and make a difference for sure.
Is there ways that we can, people listening, what can they do? What's something small, right, apart from these conversations? Is there any ideas?
I would bring a curiosity
Yeah.
to different stories, and especially people who are different from you.
Yeah.
Because there's a question that might offend people, but the question is, where are you from? All right, some people take that in an offensive manner, but the people who are asking sometimes ask it in the wrong tone or the wrong manner as well. Hey, where are you from? Right?
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, I'm born in Australia. I'm from here.
Yeah.
What are you talking about? But they're
I just say
asking,
I'm from Carlton.
what's your background? Where are your family from?
Yeah.
So the question I always ask these days is, where are your family from?
Yeah.
Right. And I was just walking to the train station to work the other day, and an old guy comes to me and is like, hey, do you know where the bus station was? He lost his wallet and had to go and retrieve it at the bus depot. And so I pointed in the direction, and he was an older gentleman, 65, 70, around there. And the question I asked him is, after pointing him, was like, yeah, come with me, I'll show you.
Yeah.
I said, where is your family from? And immediately he said, I'm from Malta. I've been here for 50 years now. And I left when I was 21 looking for new opportunities and things like that. And by asking that question, by allowing space to really hear what the other person is saying, I think you can make a difference by allowing people to make themselves feel heard, feel seen, and to be able to share fully.
Yeah.
But remember to really listen
Yeah.
if you're going to ask these questions, and if you're going to really open up their book, for example.
Yeah, exactly. And don't assume things as well a lot of the time. Like that's what I've realized, is that especially from coming from where I've come from, like in terms of our background and, having lived in Afghanistan or being from there, you don't want to assume that you know things, automatically when you hear the name, for example. So if someone is from a certain part of the world, what do you know? I think it's like being mindful that might not be right or true, or and it might not be reflective of that person that you're talking to. And I think it's that as well. So don't make assumption before you hear.
Yeah.
Especially if you're asking questions or having a conversation. But yeah.
Cool.
What are your thoughts on the 3 questions? You want to get that in?
Go on the 3 questions. Are you ready for the 3 questions?
Okay. I'm nervous now.
No, it's just 3 simple questions, man.
Cool.
Take your time.
Come on.
Answer as long as you want. First question: what are you grateful for?
What am I grateful for? For having a beautiful family and amazing friends.
Amazing. What have you realized?
What have I realized? I've realized that life is all about love. Is that famous Rumi saying, is that your heart knows the way, follow in that direction, right? is that your heart is always about love.
Right.
So that's what I have I guess realized if
Yeah.
the way, if I can answer that question in that,
Of course.
short sentence. Yeah.
Final question. What is a question you ask yourself?
What is a question I ask myself? Tricky one. I don't know. Depends on the day, I guess. Yes, I guess if it's generally like when I'm thinking to myself, I guess is that what am I really passionate about? Like, I think that's a question that a lot of people still deal with, and it's not an easy answer to get to, just because it's not easy to find your passion, right? And there's a lot of things I do and I love doing it, but I think I still probably fully don't understand what I know that I'm here to make a difference, but I don't know what that difference is yet, and how that I'm not able to fully envision that. So I think often I ask myself that question, still trying to find that answer.
Of course. Thank you so much, Hash. This was a beautiful conversation and
Thanks for having me, man.
very thoughtful. Thank you for coming on and sharing your story. Really.
I appreciate it.
It's amazing.
Appreciate it, guys. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for coming on, and we look forward to seeing what changes we can make in society. So
cool.
Thanks for listening, and always stay safe, always take care, and always get up. Peace.